Welcome to another episode of Investing in Intellectual Property with Dave. Today we have a very special guest with us. This gentleman has taken one of his family businesses to $100 million payday. He's also instrumental in another one of the family businesses that's earning seven figures a year. Please help me welcome Joe Pardo. How's it going, Joe?
Hey, I'm doing great. How about yourself, Dave?
I'm doing pretty good, pretty good. Again, thank you for giving me some time here this morning to kind of go through your journey, man. It's a pretty interesting one to say the least. In terms of kind of the roadmap here that I'm looking at, I know you have done a lot of things over the course of your time, from the family business to the YouTube channel, and a few books that you have written, and just want to get your I guess your take on those different things as we go throughout the show here. But I guess maybe first off, I want to start with the family business because again, I'm doing some research and preparation for the show here today, and it seems like you were in the family business since you were 6 years old. That's
Y-
crazy to me. Can you
y-
kind of talk a little bit about the family business?
Yeah. So, I mean, my family's been in the trucking industry since the late 50s.
Wow.
And yeah, so it started with my great grandfather being a huckster selling like fruits and veggies off the back of the truck in
Yep.
Philly in the markets. And it's a weird name, like hucksters, like a shyster type of thing. But in Philly, a huckster sells fruits and veggies off the back of the truck
Mm.
at the market, and he didn't love that, but he ended up falling in love with the trucks, and that led us down him owning. I mean, well before I was ever alive, in the trucking industry, having trucks, transportation, yeah, companies, three separate companies, and then that led to Pioneer, which, I mean, it's a long, convoluted story, but basically, Pioneer is what ended up from 1960 ended up becoming Pardo Fleet Solutions now.
Mm.
But my grandfather in 1980, 81, broke off from that company, Pioneer, which fixed trucks and sold trucks, like fixed used trucks, and broke into the parts end of it, so selling parts for heavy duty
Gotcha.
trucks, and that grew into like the $100 million
Yep.
behemoth that it was until we well, my dad ended up winded up selling it. So yeah, so that transformed into part of truck service parts, which ended up over the years becoming the largest independently owned truck parts company on the East Coast. And that so we had businesses or shops, I should say, from like Kearney, New Jersey, like basically like the armpit of New York, all the way down to Sarasota, Florida, which is on the like about an hour south of Tampa. So you had 12 locations, a couple repair shops, mostly truck part sales. It was like 10 truck part sales, two repair shops that were kind of based off of Pioneer. It was kind of like a conglomerate thing.
Okay.
But yeah, so ultimately, once I left the business in 2014. I wanted to do something else with my life. I didn't quite know what that was,
Gotcha.
but I was burnout. Like you said earlier, I started working there when I was 6, sweeping floors, putting inventory on shelves. Eventually, taking inventories and just basic tasks, right? Starting
Yep.
from the literal ground floor up. Eventually became the COO, the CTO of the company, with 150 employees, and like I said, across multiple states and
Yep.
lots of locations. And in 2014, I left. It was not very welcomed. Nobody was happy except for me and my wife, that I was leaving.
Was it a
Um,
surprise? Was it kind of a surprise to everyone when you decided to leave, or were they expecting it?
no, so in 2013, I had the conversation with my dad about leaving.
Mm.
Um, and I really wasn't sure. Like I never finished college, so I was going like, oh, I'm going to go back to college, and I'm just
Gotcha.
like, I'm going to figure it out. And so I started going back to college, and it got kind of toxic there. It was not fun to come in to my to the office and
Yep.
work, especially working with my dad, because it was just constant like battles, like,
Yeah.
headbutting. Up until April 2nd was the last day I
It's
was
my
in
birthday,
the company.
actually.
Oh, really? Are you serious?
Yeah, yeah. April 2nd. That's crazy.
Yeah, I actually I so we ended up getting into like a fist fight in the office after hours. Everybody had left. We got into a confrontation, and I actually had to leave because I had to go take a test, like for college. Fortunately, after I left, I went to the school, and the professor didn't show up. So I was very relieved because like my face was all red and I
Yeah,
was,
yeah.
because I was upset, I was mad, I was angry, confused, and just worn out.
Yeah,
So like I
I was
didn't want
gonna
to
say,
not show up, but
yeah, and look,
it would have been better.
I took a number of tests between engineering and law school, and I don't think I ever showed up for a test after having gotten in a fist fight with anyone, much less a family member. So that's definitely different.
Yeah, and I share this story because as a cautionary tale for people that go through that family, that family business life and how difficult it can be. It was not um it was not great, and I want people to know that there's something else on the other side. And again, at the time I really didn't know what it was.
Yeah,
So about a couple of the next month, I started up a podcast called the Dreamers Podcast. I started interviewing people that were living their dreams and like doing awesome things. I've been creating content since about '96 as a 10-year-old boy, writing about video games on the
yeah,
internet, right, making websites and stuff. So for me, it was nothing new. I've always been the conversational person that people would come to for their problems and wanting to hear uh, my perspective and all this stuff. Um, but so for me, it was like it wasn't like that hard to make that jump. A good friend of mine, Al Kessel, helped me like get a couple of the software programs I needed.
yeah.
But I already was also a DJ, so like I already knew how to use Audacity and editing, audio, and all that. Like I've already been down that road.
Right.
So it was like it was just take like all the things and just like
Right.
Voltron them together and
Yeah.
make it happen. And it happened within 2 weeks of me having the idea to go and start a podcast.
No, and that's interesting. And by the way, DJ Joe, man, that had to be a good DJ name, man. I
Well, it was
would go to.
DJ Rom was
Oh,
the
DJ,
is
I
the
like
name.
DJ
Yeah.
Joe better. I would have definitely came to a party if I saw a flyer that DJ Joe was on the ones and twos. But so then I guess at the company before leaving, you were you implementing a system that cut inventory in half in less than a year. So I guess and at the time that you left, I know you said you were COO as well as CTO at a different point. Were you the COO at that point that you end up leaving the company?
At that point, yeah, the CTO was much earlier on
Okay.
because there was nobody else that understood computers like I
Yeah.
did growing up and again building websites at the age of 10. So like
Yeah.
I was running all the technology stuff. But yeah, at that point, and I was 27 when that happened. So we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary here
Nice.
in just a couple months.
So
Um,
so
Go
what
ahead.
made you, I guess, what gave you the ideal kind of going back in terms of kind of developing the systems? Was it for the business? And because I'm assuming that helped out as far as kind of taking it to the next level valuation wise and just improving the improving things because that business you said ultimately got sold, correct?
Yes. So the salt. So the So the oh man. Okay. So actually I was just telling part of this story to one of our people just about 2 hours ago here in my office because he used one of the companies he worked for prior used the same software that we used
Mm,
which was called from a company called iCast
okay.
called Pacesetter. So we have a lot of like war stories from the Pacesetter days cuz I mean he had been in it since 80
Mm,
nine, I think, or 88, something like that, until like 2012, 13. So like we have a lot of common ground on that to
right.
talk about. But so we were talking about that, and part of the problem was is you had the 2008 financial issue, right? 2009. You also had this perfect storm of those problems combined with changing over of the trucks to having DPF filters, where they send the exhaust through a filter before
Yep.
it goes out the exhaust pipe,
Yep.
which has its own issues. And a lot of people were like, "Yeah, I don't want to buy a new truck. I want to buy." Or they all bought new trucks right before that became a mandated thing. And I want to say 2011. I might be off by a year, give or take a year.
Okay.
So one of the so you had the 2008 to 2009 issue trying to come out of that, the DPF thing. So everybody's buying new trucks, so they don't need as many parts. So things had started to slow down in 2012.
Mm.
And that's when I was looking at them like, well, we're sitting on like $6 million in inventory. We have like 150 lines, like vendor codes that we have, right? And some of those vendor codes, some of them have like 20 parts in it because it's for fire extinguishers.
Yep.
Some of them have tens of thousands of parts because they're filters and they're lights and then you multiply that by how many stores we have that all carry those parts. And you look at it and you're like, wow, like how, even if I sat down and just like printed out page after page to like go through the history and obviously on a page, 8.5 by 11, you only have so much space, right? So you can only put so much history there so that the details aren't that great. Basically I went through and found a algorithmic program that was built into the system, but the president of that company, ICAST, Rudy, he was like, yeah, nah, he's like, I wouldn't I wouldn't use that. And my grandfather was like dead set against it too. Up until, well, he passed away in 2012
Okay.
or 2011. No, wait, maybe it was nine. I think it was nine. I'd have to check my calendar. It's all on my calendar. I'm pretty sure it's nine because it was
Okay.
1 year after my grandmother died, and that was in '08. So yeah, it was in '09. So like 3 years into it, I was tinkering with this program, and basically what it did is it just looked at the history, month 1 month back to 25 months back, and then you could even do the years after that. And you run it through, like you kind of fill out the algorithm, like the numbers to figure out like what's the combination to make it a min and a maxing stocking amount work. So is it 0 1, is it 1 1, when does it get to 1 2, and you figure out all these different combinations, and then all of a sudden you can run it across the entire company and get yourself a result that starts to resemble something that a bigger company than somebody that's printing out all these papers and like going through the history and like, okay, when she's just, and then handing it off to someone or
Yep.
doing it yourself to manually go into the system and change each of those things. So that was a big deal. In my life, it was a turning point to one of the reasons I got burnt out. Like I was waking up, getting into the shop at 8 o'clock in the morning, right? And I was pulling pulling in stock that was coming back from these locations with the guys in the warehouse. So like we're pulling stuff out of the bins, putting it back on the shelves, helping them get stuff pulled because you were kind of like recycling the
Yep.
inventory we already had versus like, oh, we're just gonna sell it, fire sell it, or dump it somewhere
Yep.
for pennies on a dollar. So since we had a hub and spoke, it's like everything came back. We reshuffled it into there and then shuffled it back out based upon the new stocking requirements of that
Mhm.
store. Well, so 8 o'clock I'm there till like 4:30. I was like, okay, now I need to start doing the paperwork of like all the transfers and
Yep.
moving all the stuff in the system itself. Then I'd go home, eat, run, go for a run, and then come home. And from like 9:30, 10 o'clock till maybe midnight, sometimes 1 or 2 o'clock, I'd be working on that algorithm, doing test runs to see like
Oh.
what can I get it, how can I get this right? Because I got people at the in the business that are like crying to me that I'm like killing their business and their shelves are now empty. And I learned a lot of lessons from that, right? The lessons I learned, I wrote about it in my the book I wrote last, not my last book, but
Okay.
this experience of having to take a step back and say, okay, numbers don't lie, but you need human interaction. I think we're seeing that a lot now with AI, right? It's like this big push for AI, but then there's this like groundswell of people that like, I want shit that's not written. Oh, I'm not sorry for this curse,
No, you're
but
good. You're good. You're good.
I want stuff that's not written by AI, right?
Yeah.
Show me what's not written by an algorithm. And that so it's like I was living that in like 2012, 2013, where everyone's beating me up and I'm like, okay, but like when I request these 100 part numbers back, right? Because you haven't sold it in like 2 years, you're a human and can make that call to say, no, I only want to give you 45 of those part numbers. Okay, great. And of the rest of them, you had 10 of them in stock. Just give me back 4 of them so I can shuffle them back in, right?
Right.
I get that you have a 0 min max. Let's get out of that thinking,
Mm.
right? That you're not supposed to stock it, but you're a human and that you're a manager. So manage your inventory. And this is what the computer's saying, but you have the free will to say, I'm going to keep some of this. Just don't keep all of it. Come on, man. Share the wealth. We all, so we're not rebuying the same stuff over and over again.
Right.
That was the goal, right? And I tracked it day in and day out in a spreadsheet, which I still have to this day, where it went from $6 million in inventory all the way down to 3.5. And the goal was to get between 3 to 3.25. So in the beginning of the month, you have more budget, you start spending, stuff starts coming in, and
Yeah.
and it rides up. And then as the month goes down, you start to come down off of that high. And I was really proud of that. I mean, the people I talked to, they're like, that's incredible. And then we didn't have to fire sale it. We did make some returns. My grandfather didn't believe in returns. His thought was, if I have it on the shelf and I bought it for this price for $20 and I have it for 2 or 3 years, well, the cost in the system has probably gone up because, they're still selling that, raising the price.
Yeah.
Now the cost is $24 and I've sold it for that, for that much more profit later on. But I believe in everything has to pay rent. So everything takes up space, and
Yeah.
every square foot or square inch that it takes up has to be paying its rent for that space, like you pay for square footage of the rent for your building or the mortgage or the taxes or
Yeah.
whatever that ends up being. You has to justify it it is in necessity or pleasure. So if it's not paying its rent, it's got to go, right?
Yeah.
It's got to go one way or another. You need that space back so you can put it with more stuff that you actually do sell.
Gotcha. No, and that's interesting. And hey, I was working at Ford and what I think it was an engineering intern back in 2011, 12, and I was at the Allen Park test lab, and a big part of kind of my job was testing those DPFs on a truck. So
Really?
yeah, that was pretty cool, and it's crazy how things align with kind of what you guys were going through back in that day as well, with the trucks. So then, okay, you cut down on the inventory, and it seems like that's successful. And you ultimately leave the company. It seems like you start the YouTube, or just content creation. Was it specifically YouTube, or did you have other social media platforms at that point? I know
I
like MySpace,
wish
things like that. Maybe Facebook was out back then as well, but
I wish that I had started YouTube back in 2014. I dove deep into the podcasting realm.
mm,
So that's how like so I had released my first DJ album at the time in 2014, and I was doing a bunch of podcasting interviews, Disney podcast interviews
yeah,
specifically because it was a Disney mashup album of Disney music and hip hop instrumentals to tell
mm,
the story of Pixar's Up, which now is a celebrated movie, but at the time, like nobody, it wasn't as much beloved as it seems to now be as beloved.
right,
If merchandise is anything to has anything to say about that. Um, so I was doing these interviews, and when I was on the plane ride, I was actually flying to Disney World with a friend of mine to run a 5K race, and we were talking. I went through the whole spreadsheet. And I was like, is there any Disney podcasts I've missed that I should reach out to? And that's when he had mentioned a show called Entrepreneur on Fire, and this was in 2014. So John had just started his show, I guess, excuse me, about a year and a half or so
okay,
prior to that. And I was like, all right, well, it's interesting. Like I never thought about like shows that would just interview people like at the time. Remember, this is 2014, so podcasting, while not new, because it had very much existed for over a decade at that point,
okay,
well over a decade, or yeah, I guess Yeah, well over or actually about a decade at that point. Um, I just hadn't really thought about because I really didn't listen to any podcasts. To me, a podcast was just a bunch of nerds sitting around talking about probably video games or in my case Disney, because that was the kind of show that was the only kind of show that I had ever really listened to going back to like 2006, 2007. Um, and I was like, "Oh, well," I was like, I know lots of people in business. I know lots of people living their dreams. Like, I could interview people like that. Like, I have
Mm,
tons of people in my Rolodex, right,
yeah.
from life in general, that are doing interesting things. I liked inspiring other people, and I wanna inspire myself because I still didn't know. I mean, I was only, like, a month removed from walking out of the company, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do.
Right.
It is ironic though that you're such into sports, and we're talking about this because one of the things I did do was I did go. I thought I wanted to get into sports, like sports management or something like that, and
Yep.
I went to a networking event at the Wells Fargo Center. I think it was maybe the Wachovia Center at the time, um, for a Sixers game where they had a networking event prior to the Sixers game, and that's when I got to meet a good, well, I don't want to say a good friend, but became a friend of mine, who actually is now the president of the ECHL. But he was like third rank guy at the time. Like, it was like
Okay.
commissioner, like assistant commissioner or something like that, and then him.
Okay.
And now he's the top banana there. But so we hit it off. He had a family business, and all he grew up in a family business and all that. So like we were going through all the things that like I didn't like about being in a family business, and things that he didn't like, and why he ultimately decided not to stay in the family business. And then we ended up talking like the whole night, and then we got to hang out. We've kept up with each other since. But it's so for me, like I realized in one night I went to a networking event, made a friend, and realized, yeah, this isn't for me, because like I'm looking for a different life than what sports will provide, because it's
Mm,
very similar to what I already am experiencing, which is the business is 24/7, and so are you. You are the robot, right?
yeah.
Yeah, that works inside of the robot.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so
Uh,
oh, go ahead.
yeah, and I was gonna say, so were you still going to school at this point in time? And if so, what maybe was the major?
It's just for business administration. Like I said,
Okay.
I only went to 1.5 semesters back when I graduated in '04. So, it was not, school was not my strong suit. But what I found out though, when going back to school, was that I was actually doing really well at it, because I had all this life experience and
Yeah.
stuff like that. In fact, I was questioning them a lot of times, the professors, and they ultimately became friends with a couple of them, because I was also like 8, 10 years older
Right.
than pretty much everybody else in the class, except for like the 45, 50-year-old that was in the class, like one or two of those. I was the oldest one. I wasn't 18 in these classes, 19 in these classes. So
Right.
I was asking them questions. They're like, yeah, like what you're saying isn't wrong. That's how I do it at my business too, or where I work too. But
Yeah,
this is the way they want me to teach it. And it's like,
and that's
they're like
and
for
that's
accounting and stuff.
yeah, for sure. And I think that's maybe one of the many problems with school is the fact that you have, I mean, it seems like in this case, the guy who your professor had a business, but a lot of times these professors have never been business owners. They're teaching out of a book. And then to your point, you are teaching in front of 18, 19, 20-year-olds who have no real life experience to be able to push back on it. So then once you get somebody who's older in the class who has experience and had businesses, then they're pushing back. And now you're like, this seems like that just how does that kind of represent the truth, if you will, to the other students? It seems like I'm questioning everything if I'm an 18, 19-year-old at that point in that class. But again, that's one of the big issues with essentially going to school, is that you're being taught by a lot of people who don't have that real world experience, and they're just teaching from a book, or they're being told how to
Or
teach something,
recent.
as opposed to saying, hey, teach the methods and skills that work, not what is in this textbook that may be antiquated or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, the problem is they only have so much time, right? So if you wanted to go and teach all the different ways of doing it, I think it just everything needs to come with an asterisk of like, this isn't the only method that will work, you
Right.
know? So when you go somewhere else, like, and some of them had businesses, some of them did not, right? Some of them worked inside of different, big, Fortune 500 companies or Fortune 1000, I don't know, something like that. Bigger firms. So I think that when you when there's only so much time, right? Everything's got to pay rent, and when you're in a class for 2 hours or 3 hours, like, yeah, you can't necessarily teach every way, and you don't want to confuse anybody because you also have to like teach a test on it. And once you start like, I'm trying to learn this way of doing it, but then I gotta like learn it for a test. Opening it up to like these other things, it's like then you start crisscrossing ideas and things kind of get messy. So like I get why they can't necessarily do that,
I look at as
but
somebody who went to law
it
school.
does kind of suck.
I was gonna say I maybe disagree a little bit because with somebody who went to law school, that's the whole, I guess, point of law school is uh okay, and it's maybe a little different in terms of, hey, you have this precedent, you have these cases out here, these cases
Mhm.
that already been ruled on, and then you are given a fact pattern, and it's almost like, hey, argue for, based on these facts, argue on kind of what you think, and or let us know what you think. But your argument, you have to support it with arguments based on kind of precedent, if you will. So it seems like that, and maybe in undergrad they don't want to kind of, I guess, teach that method. But it seems like in law school, at least,
Mm.
you can have two different answers, and if they're supported and make sense and then supported by reasoning and precedent and things like that, then you'll still get credit for it if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I mean, and that's great that they do, because obviously there's so many different ways to accomplish something. And when you're
Yep.
talking about a lawyer, like, or law in general, like, you have to use those precedents, right? And you have to look at it from also the eyes of the people that you're trying to convey the message to, the audience.
Yep.
What's going to make sense for them? So you have to be able to think on your feet to deliver a message that
Yep.
isn't just right, but is right in the context of what they will perceive as right. Is that right? Like, it's I always go back to training day, right? It's not what you know, it's what you can prove, right? And uh so so no, I think that's great. But again, in the context of a classroom that is like, this is accounting, or this is inventory, logistics management or something like that. Like, they only have so much time to fit into it because they have to crank out the student, and that student is going to end up most likely as a cog in a bigger system anyway, versus a lawyer who, yeah, you could end up in another firm, but like, the firm still wants somebody who's a free thinker to us, at least to a certain
Yeah.
extent, right?
Right.
To be able to come up with those concepts, to be able to get people to that finish line that they want to, them to reach
Uh,
those decisions.
no, yeah, and I agree with that, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole in terms of, like you kind of was mentioning, as far as maybe ending up in a clog in a big machine, which it seems like that's what maybe school is, or college or whatever the case may be, is kind of preparing you for, which is like
Well, it
another
is.
conversation.
That's what the NBA is for. The NBA was created for that, so that
Mhm.
these big companies had a opportunity to have like a pre-vetted person that could, fulfill the needs of those big businesses that helped fund those colleges. So that's
That's
really all it's for. That's one of the reasons. So that's what led me to, talking with my professors, looking at, my grades were just, I was just acing everything, which I was not used to because I was a very much CD student, sometimes B, but for the most part, I also just didn't do homework as a kid. I was in school enough. I didn't feel that way. Don't tell my kids; they gotta do their homework. But like, so I didn't fulfill that need at the time.
gotcha.
Um, but so that the professors were like, "Well, what do you really want out of this? Like, you already have, not a lifetime of experience, but like, even if you just took at that point from 18 on, right? You already have 10 years of experience at the highest level that a lot of people will get to. So like, what are you looking for? And I was like, and I was only taking like 1, 2 classes at a time. So for me, it's like, wow, this associates is going to take like 4 years to get my associates. And then what? Where's my bachelor's? Right? It's like, cool. Like, how long is that going to take to get
Right.
the going? And then it's like, well, then where's your MBA, Joe? Because now you're like 40. Where's your MBA? And they were like, "What do you want to do? Do you want to just be you want to be a middle manager in a company?" And I'm like, "Well, no." And they're like, "Well, then what are you doing here?"
So
That's when I made that decision to say, I'm making money with my business at the same time, not a ton of money, but enough money between that and still maintaining, taking a significantly smaller paycheck for maintaining the technology on at the company, at the family company at the time. And I said, you know what, I'm just gonna do it. And I cut off school and went full time. And I would love to say it like worked out. This is very stressful. A lot of months, man. Like, I don't know where the money's going to come from. But I don't know. I mean, I guess it was worth it. I mean,
right.
ultimately, at the
So
end of this day, I get the story.
right, exactly. It's content, that's for sure. So then, did you because it seemed like in 2018 you went back to uh a new company that's kind of was birthed out of the repair shop of the family. So was that, I guess, after you made the decision of, okay, I'm kind of done with school, I'm gonna continue to do this content creation thing, but I'm kind of gonna go back and try to help build this new company with the family?
So that was in 2015 that I stopped school.
Okay.
And so I was doing consulting, I was doing some website building. I really hated doing website building. And I was running the podcast and making. I had started up the Independent Podcast Conference, which at the time was called the Mid Atlantic Podcast Conference. Back in the end of 2014, I started that. So
Okay.
we were hosting these annual events, and that was bringing in money and leads to like website stuff, consulting stuff. So it was just kind of like very piecemeal, like bringing things in. But at least with Icon Independent Podcast Conference, I was able to put a bunch of money together towards like throughout the year and kind of string it together. And then my wife was still working at the time as a teacher. What changed in 2018 is my son was born. So we had our second kid, first kid in 2016, Ava. Dominic was born in 2018. And what changed was um, I in 2016, late 2016, like November 2016, I got an offer to come work at a nonprofit, and that was I loved it. It was working in well, I loved it with the exception of what I had to do. So I had to build websites so it was a nonprofit that had for-profit businesses under it. So I was the web director of one of those businesses. So I got to work with these interns that came through the nonprofit program,
Mhm.
underserved youth. It's called HopeWorks. It was HopeWorks in Camden at the time. I think it's just called HopeWorks now because now they've actually expanded into Pennsylvania, into Philly. But these underprivileged youth coming in, and they get to learn programming, coding, and
Yeah.
they would take that, and then they would after they complete the programming uh, stuff or like tests and all the checkpoints that they had to go through, they would get a internship, and it could be with me. It could have been with the very awesome GIS program, which is a global positioning information systems
Yep.
company. There we had partnerships with all kinds of different companies, Subaru, um, ShopRite. I can't think of some of the other ones, but those were like two of the big partnerships that we had. American Water as well, so they could go into apply for one of those paid internships, and one of them was mine. So I was working with these youth, and it was awesome. It was every like that was the best part, was getting to work with those youth, getting to coach them and console through them, their day-to-day trials and tribulations, and work with them on these businesses. It was the building of the website part that I was just it got very hard. It's not hard, but it's just very frustrating, I guess is the word.
Gotcha.
Because people want a beautiful website, but they don't know what that looks like. And then
Yeah.
you show them and you have to put all these hours into it for them to go, well, yeah, but and it's like great, like, but I'm over budget and we're like, or they wouldn't provide picture. It was a whole big thing. So, and it's the same problem. It wasn't just there, right? That just comes with any client that you're doing creative work for.
Yeah.
You know, you like ultimately I was like, I will take my personal camera and go take photos for you. I will do it myself. Um so anyway, like I was there for a year and a half, and it was wearing me down on the business, like the business side of it, not the intern side. Because like if I could have just worked with the interns, like that was the youth was it was awesome. Um, and my dad, you know, he had a trucking company that came out of Pardo truck parts, and that was on the decline because you know rates and all. And he's not a super logistical person,
Okay.
so that was failing hard, like millions of dollars hard. He was able to jump out of that and back into Pioneer, rebranded Pioneer to Pardo Fleet Solutions. And in 2017, they were doing like negative $175,000 because most of their business was that Medway trucking company that my
Yeah.
dad had. So, so he started to, you know, invest all of his time, energy, and money because he really didn't have much else to go and do because Medway had shuttered. Pardo Truck Parts had been sold back in 2015. And he invested all his time and energy to, at that point in 2018, I was running up against a problem. My wife wasn't going back to work because we had two kids at that point, and we didn't have a means of getting, you know, childcare that we were able to afford or able to feel comfortable with, because you know you got a 2-year old and a newborn 6-month old, that you're like, okay, what are the options? And my dad for months, from like the beginning of 2018 till the summer of 2018, would come over and he'd be talking about what's going on at the shop, and you know, I really want you to come back, and will you come back? And I'm like, I don't really want to work with you again, like this is not um because I mean and it has not been easy since, I could tell you. um but you know, I relented because I was like, look, between my business and working with the nonprofit, there just wasn't enough money. There just wasn't enough money coming in total, like in total, and there was only one of me, right? So it wasn't really yet great for me at the time, because I was like really stressed out because I'm like, well, we're coming up on the deadline here where Melissa's not going back to work, and you know, I'm only making so much money here, and there's only so
Yeah.
many hours to go around to do the consulting. At that point, I wasn't doing website building for anybody. It was mostly just consulting and the podcast. And
So,
yeah, it was tough.
so I was going to say, what, because at one point, maybe you're getting paid with doing the nonprofit, the website stuff, but it's maybe not a whole lot. But then, kind of going back to the family business, it seems like that maybe wasn't doing as well. So I guess that was it any like trepidation as far as going back, knowing that okay, how am I get paid with kind of the family business since it's essentially losing money. So was that like a question or a thought that you had before kind of going back?
So by the middle of 2018, it was no longer like, I guess, officially losing money.
Okay.
But with that said, like I wasn't getting a big pay raise to come back to the company. And that was the start of the next level of frustration for me, man. Cause um so I go back and I know, you know, I had the independent podcast conference coming up, which
Yeah.
was, you know, it was a moneymaker. You know, it didn't make hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I also never put like tens of thousands of dollars in advertising. It was all grassroots and
Yeah.
all that. Um, so I basically, when I came back, I had to ramp up my consulting business and the independent podcast conference, because I needed to fill in that void. Now,
Yeah.
one thing, now, you know, working for the family business did give me time to be able to come home at a decent hour, not sitting in traffic. It did afford me the ability to take days off where I needed it. Um, for the kid, mostly for the kids, and things like that. But but yeah, it was really stressful. I mean, there was the promise of like, hey, because at that point I was really in debt, like bad, right? Because
Yeah.
like that was part of the whole like, hey, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough money, like but we got credit, so there's that. We can keep it going and things like that. And it's like, all right, well, the promise is like, look, we get this built up, and then we'll take some of that debt off of your hands, right? We'll get it knocked down for you. So so there was that, but it was difficult. There was a lot of yelling back and forth between me and my dad, and but one of the first things that was tasked to do was we talked about that computer system from before,
Yep.
right? The ICAS system. So he was still utilizing that at the end of the process, right? So they were like writing everything on cards, and then they would turn the cards in, and then my dad was sitting there trying to like read the hieroglyphics and the smudge, grease printed up cards and everything like that, like a week after the fact, trying to like put a bill together in that ICAS system. So the first task was, let's get a system that isn't ICAS, right? That can get tablets in people's hands, that can get things moving and
Yep.
enable us to growth. So I went out, found a couple different systems, picked a system, adopted that system for us, and made it work for how we operate. And we've been able to evolve on that as we have grown over the years. So yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that people that are looking for they're looking for, when you're looking for like a system or to implement something new into your process. You always got to be looking like 5 steps ahead, right? Like what does this enable me to be able to do for things that I haven't even gotten to think about, or maybe we've just dabbled in, but like if we were to expand in that, are we now going to hit that limitation with our current process, our current system?
Right.
And is it going to like, what's the workaround at that point? And is it having to go find a new system? Like, knock on wood, we've been with our current system since the middle of 2018, and have been able to adapt it every step of the way as we've grown to have mobile mechanics at all, right? Like,
Yep.
and being able to submit paperwork and stuff mobily, as well as here in the shop, and even selling truck parts. That once my dad's non-compete ran out in 2020, he dove real hard. I mean, there's a whole warehouse of stuff here. I'll turn my camera around here. There's a whole warehouse of stuff
Yep.
right there, of parts that he dove right back into to want to sell. So
Mm.
that's been a challenge. But with that said, we have an online site now that I put together myself. As much as I don't like doing websites, I don't mind
Right.
when they're for me. Like, it's for when they're for other people. Um, that sells parts right on the website, right out of our inventory. So it's like, always be looking at things like 5 steps ahead. Like, is it, it's one thing to say, oh, I want something that can carry me into the future, but like, go through the steps and actually
Right.
make sure that like, what is the expandability of now. And the other big thing is, Dave, is I didn't want a system, because there was a lot of pressure to go with a system that works for the mobile, or for the truck shop repair industry. And when I look at the truck shop repair industry, that has only shrunken. That has not
Yep.
grown, right? So I don't want to be in a pool of people using a system of people that are getting smaller and smaller,
Yeah,
that the
for
price will
sure.
just go
Yeah,
up and up because
that
they
makes sense.
literally can't afford to do it otherwise,
Right.
right? So I wanted a system that wasn't beholden to our industry so much as any repair industry.
Yep.
And that's why I went with the system I went with, because it had customization to fit our needs versus like fitting us into that box, and not having us be stuck like, oh, well, now the pool of truck shop or repair shops, or truck, for specifically heavy duty truck repair shops, is went from say 2,000 or 3,000 shops across the country. Now it's down to like 1,500, and they only have a pie, a small piece of that pie. So now my
Gotcha.
price has gotten jacked up, and I'm locked into a system that has no way out. I
Gotcha.
want to know how
So
to export everything.
so then what would you say was your big break with everything? Because it seems like, at this point, just kind of being back in the family business, and that's kind of more or less seems still like a work in progress, and things are still kind of growing and whatnot. Do you feel like the big break came with the consulting, or maybe kind of the YouTube? Because you do have 16,000 followers on subscribers on YouTube, so it seems like things are going decent with that. Or was it the consulting, or what do you think things were the big break where it was like, okay, now we're kind of rocking and rolling?
So I would say it's definitely been with YouTube. YouTube has enabled so much more for me to be able to reach more audience that are more dedicated to what I love to talk about, which is business.
Yeah,
Having the podcast is, it always. I mean, look, out of the gate, it hit iTunes new and noteworthy when that meant something back in 2014, and that was awesome. But then like that came down like pretty hard, right? Because I was in a place that I had no business being in
right.
at the time. I was still very new, and then you go back to you can still listen to those first episodes if you go to my website. Um, I just had no business being there at the time, and I also didn't have it's I've always lived in that weird space of liking to take two things as part of like the DJ brain in me,
Yeah,
taking two things that aren't necessarily related and then finding the commonality in them. And not everybody is about that, right? People like things to be clean edges and oh wow, look at that. Good job,
yeah, the
StreamYard.
heart.
But when I actually make the heart, it's not actually doing it. But I was making a box.
Yeah, and I think
Oh,
that's something with StreamYard where, man, it did that on Dan Klishner as well, and inventor of Bop It, where he was doing something. It was like some balloons start floating around. So it seems like they have some gesture recognition software in StreamYard.
I wonder if that's so that happened. It happened on if I do like a thumbs up, we'll do like a thumbs up. No? Oh man, that's a missed opportunity, right?
Yeah.
One of our softwares is Dial Pad, and we were on like a call, and all of a sudden it like started like showing up thumbs down symbols, but it wasn't like the emojis. Like you could click the little emojis on the bottom of the screen, and it would do
Yeah,
it like in the corner.
gotcha.
It was just like big, like right in there, and like we're having like this client meeting, we're trying to get them to work with us, and like in the middle of the meeting there's just like this big thumbs down on the screen. I'm like, what the
Yeah.
heck is this? Yeah,
Uh,
so
so,
that's interesting.
so then you said the YouTube, and I know, kind of looking back at your channel, you've been doing it for a number of years, and it seemed like at one point you were kind of doing a lot of different things. You were maybe, I guess, kind of breaking down Judge Judy episodes at one point, and
I I have done a
what,
couple of those. Yeah, they're fun.
yeah, what do you think you've seen the most success with YouTube? And 'cause it seems like the Shark Tank stuff is seems like it's really picked up for you. Has that been like the big success thing that you have done on YouTube, and what made you kind of go after that audience?
So, yeah, Shark Tank definitely has far and away been the number one thing. As much as I would love for it to be other things, so it came to me when in 2020 I actually stepped away from the business here, the family business here,
Okay.
part of Fleet Solutions, because of COVID, and because my son has a reactive airway disease, so he has like asthma when he gets sick. So he doesn't
Mhm.
have to get sick, like he could just have like the common rhino
Yeah,
cold, and he's going to get real sick,
gotcha.
um and ended up in the hospital twice. So I was like, yeah, I was like, I need to like step away. So
Right.
in 2020 I stepped away. I was still in the background running the tech side stuff, but I'd set things up so we could get to a good a pretty good place. um so I was coming in like one day a week and that kind of stuff, but I was trying to keep my distance because I didn't want to get him sick.
Right.
That was a tough time, and still feeling the ramifications of some of that now. So my wife and I were watching, I started watching Cinnamon Toast Ken at the time. I don't know if you know who Cinnamon Toast
Yeah,
Ken
I've
is?
never heard of it. Oh,
So he's like good friends with PewDiePie. Have you heard of
okay.
PewDiePie? Okay.
No.
No? No PewDiePie? Oh, wow. Okay. All right. So he was doing like these reaction videos, and I was
Mhm.
like, I was ended up watching them with my wife because he would react to like TLC type stuff
Gotcha.
that's on the TLC channel. So it was like, but he's a gamer, he's about my age, we say, share some of the similar views, so I always thought it was interesting. And it's always interesting to the female persuasion to watch TLC. So I was like, oh, like this fits, right? Like I get what I want, she gets what she would, and she would agree with Ken as well. But I'm watching. I always like to take two things and put them together. And I was like, well, what if I did this but for business content? So I was like, oh well, there's The Profit, which is a great show with LaMarcus Lemonis. There's Shark Tank. There's Undercover Boss. Like there's all these different shows. And I was like, what if I did that, but take the business spin on it? And so I just like, how I got to make this work, and I had to put about a month and a half of effort into understanding the YouTube copyright system, which is got a lot of quirks and features, as Doug DeMuro would say. And so I put the effort in, and then I started doing it I did it for about 6 months. I was releasing like 1-2 videos a month, or I'm sorry, a week. And then I realized, like, why am I not doing the episodes that are airing the night that they're airing? Because that's when the
Right.
most search traffic is happening. Duh, right?
Mm,
So it seems obvious, but it took me 6 months to get to that, or 4.5 months to get to that place. So I did it. I did it with my friend. I started doing them with Larry Roberts, who you'll see on some of those episodes. Which
yeah.
now it's like a guest appearance, but I don't do guest appearances anymore because their time is a problem. And then just well, really the time is really the
Okay.
problem. But then there's also some technical things that I was running into, and then as well as my guest isn't well versed on doing reaction videos, so they're not always the best, like to figure out, like
Right.
to think on their feet or to have something to say. So and then those episodes will run really really long, like sometimes like 27, 38
Yeah.
minutes, and it's like, this is like an 8-minute video that's ballooning into 27 or 37, and that's a lot, right? So uh so yeah so that so as I was doing that, I was just progressively, have picked up steam with it, and found, what I call the super community, people who want to be better, not just for themselves but for the people around them. and
Yeah.
and business is a great way of expanding that, right? Doing great things, and then enabling those people that to work with you to go and do even greater things as a
Yeah.
whole.
Well, and that's, I guess that's a good segue because you have the super community and you talked a little bit about uh yes, or you welcome, if you go to the website, these pitches that are maybe Shark Tank. I guess I think you call it the Super Tank, where people can pitch their business ideas to you for potential of getting funded. How has that gone? And have you kind of any cross your desk that was like, oh, this is actually pretty interesting?
So I've been meaning to make an update video, and I've had people ask about update videos to
Okay.
this. It's a shame this is about 53 minutes into the video, but yeah. So I've had a handful of people come forward, maybe like 6, 7, 8, something like that. Maybe
Okay.
maybe like 6 or 7. And I look, I want everybody to go and find their thing, right? That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be my thing. Um and I'm not even 100% sure what I'm specifically looking for. And I know it's not a tremendous amount of money, but I need to actually update it because it's probably closer to like 13 or 14,000 at this point.
Yep.
I just have been dumping in the
AdSense.
revenue from, AdSense from YouTube's AdSense. So each month it just grows a little bit as an incentive and in a way to give back to the community if we find like a product. Now, with that said, some of the products have been pitched, I I don't necessarily feel that passionate about. One of
Right.
them, though, I can say, and I've wanted to do a video. Need to do a video about this. The whole thing, not just this one particular, but it was a female adult toy. Um, and my wife's like, "Are you really interested? Are you going to do this?" And I was like, "Look, I'm open to the idea of listening to what somebody who's passionate about it, and especially if they're a fan of my work and fan of the community. Like I'm interested to listen. um with that said, they were not far enough along in the process. They were looking at a company that's like, we'll build whatever you want, and it'll only, it's $5,000. And I'm like,
Oh,
it's probably starting at $5,000.
right.
And how far along? And we got a sketch. That's what we got so far. I'm like, yeah, I don't think my 12 or even 15,000 is going to go
Yeah.
real far in helping get that product, let alone market that product. And I can help. It's more of like a guidance thing. Like, I'm paying you to consult for you
Right.
versus you paying me to consult.
Oh,
But so it's got to be the right match. I've had one company reach out about a water. They want to sell water that helps feed people in other countries. I'm like, I maybe, but I don't know. I had trouble getting there where it's like we're talking about water, but we're also talking about feeding people.
yeah. In other countries at that.
Yeah, yeah. It was tough for me to get there, and they weren't asking for a ton of money. I mean, it was like
Gotcha.
5 grand or something like that. So I
Hmm.
was like, that doesn't seem like a whole lot. So I was a little leery of that, but I was also just not making the connection. And I feel
Gotcha.
bad because, like, I don't want to talk bad about anything because, like, maybe it goes on to be like the next thing that like Kylie Jenner's doing, and then, or buying that water and feeding people. And but I had a lot of questions, and they had great answers for all the how much, like, what's one meal, like, what is a meal, right? How
Yep.
much protein is it? How much carbs is it? What are we talking about, like, as far as food? Um, so I don't know. Like, I don't. It's just, there's been a few other projects. There's like a laundry basket project for people that use laundromats, which I think that could work, but I don't know. When you're the problem I keep coming back to on that is when your competition is a dollar at the dollar store, having these things like niceties, like space to put like change or whatever
Right.
attached to it, hangers and stuff, like, it's like cool, but like now we're talking about a much more expensive solution to something that people that are going to a laundromat. I mean, not everybody that's going to a laundromat has, let's say, money problems or money, dilemmas,
Right.
challenges, but um again, your competition's a dollar. So
For sure, for sure. And again, from my intellectual property standpoint, and that brain, when I've seen a lot of this stuff from, and again, I've had clients ranging from startup companies to multi-billion-dollar companies. So I kind
mhm.
of see the gamut. It seems like with the startup companies, it better be very simple. It better be very effective, and kind of provides a solution to a decent sized problem, especially when you start getting off into the dollar, $2 range. It's like, okay, is this problem a solution to a headache that I go through? Maybe I'll do it. But if it's just another way of doing it that doesn't necessarily maybe solve an issue of the current way, then it's kind of maybe like whatever. Which I think this brings it to a good point of IP, because it seems like some of the pitches that you're getting are from the basket to the toy. It seems like some of these have some patent applicability to them. How important do you think uh just intellectual property is as it relates to a business? And that, I mean, obviously it can be trademarks or patents, whatever the case may be. How important do you think, and I know you're, business coach and consult with uh people who are trying to grow their companies to the next level. How important is that to you, of this whole thing of IP, intellectual property?
So I always try to take the fire ready aim. approach. As you know, I think that IP is important, but I think that what's more important is go and sell one first, right? Go to the farmer's market, go to the flea market, and like get a table and try to sell. See what the what the reflection back to you is first before you go down the road of like let's spend 10, 20, 30,000 to get that patent, right? Um and yeah, somebody could steal an idea, but you're you you gotta get feedback, right? You gotta prove that something's gonna be able to sell. Because oh no, a patent is great if you got, millions of dollars just sitting around and you're like, hey, let's just buy up a bunch of patents, right? Cool, like that's awesome. And then you can patent hawk or troll, I guess. But like that's not really how I would want to spend my life doing
Right.
things.
Well,
So like let's get like the prototype, right? And then let's get the version 1 from the prototype that we can actually like reproduce at least a handful of them and sell,
sure.
and then get that feedback and then say, okay, now we have something that does sell. So I can envision spending or going into debt to go get that patent and protect it so I can protect it. But you also, if you're not willing to protect it, then it's not worth getting, right? That's the way I see it. So it's like not only do you need the money to get it, but then you need the money to go and defend it. And that's a whole nother, depending how big the fish is that you're, talking about, it can be very, very expensive. Now
No,
you
yeah,
could
for
speak more to
sure.
that than I could.
No, absolutely. And I think this is maybe a big reason why having like that business coach, but then having that IP attorney is important because just being able to talk through those matters, maybe number one, because like you said, a patent that gives you an exclusionary right. People ask me all the time, hey, uh, can I sell this now that I have a patent on it or whatever? I'm like, hey, you could have sold this thing before you had a patent. A patent doesn't give you the right to do anything. A patent gives you the right to it's an exclusionary right. It gives you the right to exclude others from doing something. Uh,
Well, it's I would say the right to defend it, right? Like that's the only right that I would think
No, yeah,
if
and
you're
I
talking
think
about
yeah,
rights.
that's maybe a semantic thing, but yeah,
I mean, I guess you
essentially
could defend it without it, right? But that's where like, we set up that booth, right? Because we have these new socks and they got this thing, and maybe it's patentable, maybe it's not. I'm not really sure because I haven't spent the money to go down that road. But if I start taking pictures of everything and like document that I did this, like then you have something that's defendable even before you got to uh,
no, yeah, well,
go
you
down
have
the
to have an
patent road.
issue patent. You can't. I mean, that's like most of anything. If you go to the courts for copyright or maybe for a trademark or any form of intellectual property, you have to have some type of protection on it. So if you haven't protected, say, the patent, then you're not going to be able to get any. The court is going to say you don't own it. You have to own something to protect it. Like, for example, your house. If you own your house, then you can protect intruders and things like that. But if you go to a house that you don't own, and now you're trying to defend it, they're like, hey, you don't even own this. Yeah, I think you're definitely going to have a patent on something. And then at that point, like you said, you can defend it or exclude others. I guess that's the term of art: exclude others from kind of doing it, making it, or using it, or selling it. But as it relates to kind of selling something at a trade show or a neighborhood, whatever the case may be, I do think that's a good idea. I think that at the very least you should have a provisional patent on it, and the reason is because that at least kind of gets your place in line. Because in the U.S., once you publicly disclose something, you have a year to file on it, or you are barred from filing that application. But in other countries, you are like such as China, once you disclose something initially, you can't even file a patent protection on. You have to file for the patent protection before you disclose it publicly. So
Mm,
that's that kind of risk that you run when you're trying to kind of sell something and you're disclosing it publicly via this sale. Then you try to later go back and patent it. In the U.S. again, they give you a year grace period, but in other countries, you can't even file a patent protection if you're selling things and then try to go back and file on it. So that's one of the
wow.
things that we always try to say. Hey, make sure at least get a provisional, because the provisional, it can be, you can draw your thing on a napkin or a piece of paper, sketch a real rough sketch, and you can file that. It doesn't have to be in a nice formal requirements that a non-provisional application has to be in. It's a lot less expensive, uh, maybe a couple $100s. And then at that point, okay, I have something on file. Now they don't examine it at the USPTO, but at least give your place in line so that once you do go file a non-provisional and you're willing to go spend that money because it seems like it's been well received, then at that point you still have your place in line, so you still get the date that you initially filed the application, then you can still file it in other countries because uh, it's not that provisional application or that sale is not considered a public disclosure because you have this this patent protection on it. So I think it's a number of benefits to do a provisional patent application if you're going to try to sell something and see what type of reception you get
Mm.
before just trying to sell it and don't do anything. And okay, if it's well received, then I'll do a non-provisional. Okay, let's do a provisional application. If it's well received that you start selling it, okay, we can go convert it into a non-provisional. I'm willing to spend the money at that point. I'm not sure if that makes sense at
No,
all. But
I
that's
wasn't aware of the provisional only costing a couple $100 to do.
yeah, yeah,
But do you do is that a couple $100 like through the the patent office, or is
yeah.
that because you're paying for a lawyer to get that?
Oh yeah. So the USPTO or the government, they're going to want their money. And this is another fun fact. The patent office, the USPTO, is one of the only branches of government that's actually makes money.
Mm.
So a lot of government branches, such as like the courts and whatever the case may be, they actually lose money. But the USPTO is one of the only
Huh.
government branches that actually makes money. Uh, and part of that is because of the fees and stuff like that. So the couple $100, if you're an individual inventor trying to kind of start a company, you're going to be considered a small entity. So to file a provisional application as a small entity is only 200 or 300 bucks to file that application. Now, you don't even necessarily have to have, and I mean, obviously, I always say to go talk to an attorney, but to file a provisional application, you can just do that yourself, sketch it on a piece of paper or a napkin or whatever, and file it. You don't even have to have an attorney kind of help you out with that. Now, again, I would at least consult with an attorney to some degree to say, hey, this is what I'm looking to do and try to get some feedback. And maybe that costs you another 200 or 300 bucks, but it's not going to be the 10,000 or 8,000 for you to have the attorney do a nice non-provisional application that has to have the drawings in a certain format, have to have the actual application portion, the detailed description is what we call it, or the specification in another format, and then you're filing it because that's going to get examined by the USPTO. The provisional application doesn't get examined. That's just a placeholder. That's just essentially a bookmark. But you have to convert it to a non-provisional within a year. And as you mentioned,
Oh.
being able to okay, start selling this thing, getting feedback from investors or family and friends and things like that. Uh, if you do that within a year, now you can make that determination. Do I want to just let this patent application lapse or this provisional patent application lapse, or do I want to convert it and pay the money to an attorney to actually convert it into a non-provisional? So that's, I guess, how I would kind of go about that process.
So the provisional will let you defend it
No,
in the
you're not going to
meantime?
be able to
Oh,
defend it
okay.
because they're not examining it. That's just a placeholder in line. But you can, it doesn't start the
Okay.
clock. So because once you sell something or disclose it publicly, your clock in the US starts where you have a year to file on it, or you no longer you're barred from filing it. And then in other countries,
Okay.
some other countries, you can once you sell something and publicly disclose it, is what we call it, you can't even file a patent application in that country. So that
Mm.
provisional application allows you to gotta get some tests and some feedback done before you decide to spend the money of a non-provisional, which is a lot more expensive. But then it also protects you in case you want to go into other countries that you will otherwise be barred because you were selling it and things like that.
The thing that comes to my mind is, did you hear about the people that made an AI program to put all the different chemicals together? They like invented 40,000 chemicals and like, I don't
Mhm.
know, a couple of like a day or something like that, something
Yep.
ridiculous that could kill people. Um, like, why not just do that with patents? I mean, like, obviously, it costs a lot of money to get a patent regardless, right?
Yep.
So that wouldn't necessarily that's, like, one of the bars of entry, but even just to have a provisional patent, like, how messed up would that would that mess things up for so many companies if, like, all of a sudden, every conceivable revision of a product all of a sudden that doesn't already have a patent that's created for it, all the other revisions are now created and like provisioned like all at once because somebody
Oh,
was like, I don't care about, like, it might cost, I don't know, $10 million or $20 million, $1 billion, I don't know, but
so no,
like,
go ahead.
oh, you there?
No, yeah,
Oh.
I'm trying to figure out. So you're saying that maybe why don't people kind of go the provisional route to try to protect a lot more stuff, or
Oh, no, no, I was saying somebody, like, breaking the game. So, like, you use, like, an AI like, you train an AI on all the patents that exist, right? And then you
yeah,
say, "I want patents that aren't like that, that aren't already in existence, but are just different enough to try to blanket, like, any kind of creation around anything that already exists or maybe even things that don't even exist." That wouldn't
gotcha.
even necessarily make sense,
Right,
just in
no,
case somebody
yep,
was like, but, I mean, if you have to the provision provisional isn't enough for you to defend it on,
yep.
then I guess that kinda blocks that idea.
No, yeah, for sure. Because if you have a provisional application, then the USPTO is not even examining it. It's literally like just a bookmark, get your place in line. Because we have in the US, we have a first to file. So the first one to file on that invention, they're going to get in protection. So if you file it, if I file something January 1st, you file something the same invention January 2nd, I filed it first, and therefore I'll get protection on it. It used to be
Mm,
this first to invent rule, where if you can prove that you invented the invention before I filed on it, then you would get protection. But US did away with that. It's the first to file. So that provisional
mm,
application is essentially, it doesn't get examined. Again, it doesn't have to be in the proper format that a non-provisional has to be in, but it just gets your place in line. But again,
mm,
from what you're saying, it also kind of talks to another point, because to get a patent, it has to be not only new, but it has to be non-obvious. So you're going to have to, in a patent application, describe to the examiner, okay, yeah, this is new. For example, if you had a bottle and it didn't have a cap on it. If I have this bottle and it was a bottle without a cap, and then somebody come along and say, or say it had a cap, but it had a cap that was one of those one you needed a bottle opener to open. Somebody said, okay, I'm gonna do a cap, but I'll do the threaded cap that you twist off. Now
mhm,
you have to explain to the USPTO, okay, it's different, but why is that not obvious? Why wouldn't somebody do that? So what you're saying, as far as doing all these variants, you're in terms of being able to get a patent on those different variants, you're gonna have to describe to the patent office, why is that why is that not obvious? And that typically is done
mm.
by way of that patent application, where you're explaining those details of it, as opposed to just kinda saying, "Okay, this is different from that," if that makes sense, yep.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. I mean, I have a friend that works in the patent office,
Okay,
and
examiner, yeah.
I've heard lots of horror stories over the years, uh, but it's because like that I think that if I recall correctly, that exact question, like, why is this not obvious,
Yep,
right? Or why is it obvious that it should just not be a thing that's patentable?
yep.
Um,
And that's,
but
to be
yeah.
honest with you, and this the unfortunate part of the patent office or the patent system, is that's subjective, right? Something that's
Mhm.
obvious to you may not be obvious to me, which may not be obvious to the judge, who may be ultimately deciding on that matter. So that's where, issue come to play, is that obviousness prong, if you will, is more of a subjective prong, which sometimes it works, sometimes maybe it doesn't work to your advantage. But again, I mean, I've just seen like the how this thing have changed. Somebody getting a patent on their invention or whatever, and it really changing their life. And I just seen that way too many times, to the point where it's like and if you have something that's worth it, if it's simple, as if it's effective, and it's cost effective in those things, and it solves that problem. Solves a problem, it's definitely something that's worth looking at filing an
Mm.
invention on. And then I know we was talking beforehand with the Q collar, and then one of the first things that you hear on Shark Tank is, "Hey, do you have a patent on it?" Which brings us to another point is, if you're looking to get funding, first person that people are potential investors are going to want to hear is it protected? Because if this isn't protected, then my investment can go down the toilet, because it's not backed by anything. So that's another big reason for uh the whole pan is the even if you're look at I know that it may not get issued, or whatever the case may be. If nothing else, it allows you to open yourself up so that you can start bringing in funding, because they're going to want to know, uh are you protecting this invention?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in some cases, I do know that in some cases it seems like they know that it's not a protectable thing,
Right.
and
No, yeah,
they're
and if it's
still
not
willing to do it
protectable,
because the
exactly.
hustle is
Yep.
there. Like, make the money while you can, and then
Yep.
we move on to the next
For
thing.
sure. Yep. Exactly.
Because
Yep.
you're investing in the person at that point more than something that they either said they invented, or uh, you know
No, yeah,
maybe more likely had someplace build it for them.
you're 100% right on that. And then again, all things are not protectable. So I'm not saying, hey, you're going to invent something. A lot of times I have to tell people, hey, this, you're not going to be able to get a patent on this. And that's not to say that you can't make money off of it. It's just to say that you can't get a patent on it. So like you say, it may be something that you kind of make as much money as you can while it's hot, and then maybe kind of move on to something else. So, I mean, I definitely agree with that. But to the extent that it is protectable via a patent or whatever the case may be, it's worth it. And then you can also get a design patent on it, where it's like you're kind of protecting the ornamental look of it, if it's a product which is different from the utility aspect of it. So
Mm.
no,
Yeah.
for
Oh,
sure, for sure.
absolutely.
No, yeah, so I guess, I mean, kind of rolling it back to you a little bit. So with the books, what was the I guess the thinking to come out, because you have a number of books that you have that I kind of want to kind of get what was the origin of that, from Sales Won't Save Your Business, and then another one that you have, Joe Pardo's 31 Life Changing Concepts. So what made you start? Okay, let me kind of put in pen and paper and start selling it, in terms of kind of my business ideal, so to speak.
Yeah. So the books, the first one was the 31 life changing concepts. I really wanted to create something that I could, obviously you want to create products for, you build an audience, right? I had an audience, with the podcast. Wanted to build something that I could sell and stand behind, and I wanted something that I created through and through. And that's why I'm not an artist, but I drew all the pictures in that book. And I did it in an art style that I felt comfortable with. But that book went on to being an Amazon bestseller, which was really cool. None of the other books got to that level. Sometimes the most simplest, or and shortest and most concise is the best way to go. But that's how that book came to be. The second book was like followed up on that, where I didn't, because printing color pages was tough. I didn't want to be the one coloring in those pictures and that imagery, so I made a coloring book for you to go and color. That's How to Dream Big and Win. And then I started writing the Sales Won't Save Your Business book not too long after that, the second book. And in the middle of, in the middle, but like at one point pretty early on, I had this, like, I was watching, there was a watch a lot of documentaries. I say I don't read books, but I read people through the
Yeah.
conversations that I get to have with them. And then I use documentaries to supplement that as well.
Mm.
And I was watching one about Banksy, and I had this like, I went to sleep, and I woke up, like, I don't know, 10, 20 minutes into it, and I had this like vision of like how Banksy had, like, every image but in a different color, like the same image but over and over in different colors. Um with words, and I was like, wow, like, like, what if I took like the same words and did it over and over and over and over again, and then like painted on it um bold lettering to create characters on the page. Like, it was just like really, so it's all self affirmations, and
Mm.
then there's like a message written in the, like, the pages of the book. So there's like 160 or 180, I don't quite remember. I think it's 160.
Okay.
160 self affirmations, and I gave it to a friend of mine, Danielle, and she was like, "Oh my god, this is incredible!" And she like wrote the foreword for the book, because I didn't quite know how, like, I had this thing, but like I didn't quite know how to use it myself.
Mm.
So yeah, so I did that, and then eventually got up around to doing Sales Won't Save Your Business, and that came out in 2018 finally. So it was like I wrote the first book in 2015, 2016, 2017, it was like the 3 books, and then the
Okay.
4th book being in 2018, and that was the most complete book, but that in itself is a workbook as well, because there's lines in there and questions after
Mm.
each chapter for you to write your own answers and put, like, kinda piece together what you want to do with your business and where you wanna take it. So, I like things like that. I've always liked, like, when we got the scholastics
Yeah.
in school, I was the one going for, like, the CD-ROMs and the workbooks rather than the books, because I'm just a really slow reader. So I try to write in a way that is, easy to read. So I use big text, which I've
Okay.
gotten a lot of great feedback about over the years. People love the fact that they
Yeah.
can read it without needing their reading glasses,
Right.
as well as, just writing very concisely, and because I find a lot of books very boring, honestly. A lot of the stories, it's like they're weaving these stories of other people and things into a book. And I no offense, I mean, I'm friends with a lot of authors, and I love all you. I get the heart. How do I do the heart thing?
Yeah,
The
the
heart
heart.
thing back.
There you go. There you
Yay!
go. There you go.
Love you guys, but for me, it's just very hard to read. I can count on maybe two a little over two hands how many books I've actually read over the
Mm.
years. And I want to say, maybe half of them, were biographies, but
Those seem to be
yeah.
a lot more interesting, because typically when you're at least doing reading a biography on a successful person, they've kind of had some interesting stories to tell about as they kind of rose to the top, if you will. So that, yeah.
Mhm.
So those are pretty cool. And you can go get those books are all of them on Amazon? I know you have the website, I think joepardo.com as well.
Yeah, yeah, you can get them there. You can get them on Amazon. You get all 4 of them digitally for, I think it's like 15 bucks.
Nice.
You can go on Amazon and buy them individually in paperback,
Okay.
or in digital. An audiobook for 31 life-changing concepts and for Sales Won't Save Your Business.
Gotcha.
Yeah, my friend Al Kessel narrated both those, did a great job. And I actually am in Sales Won't Save Your Business. There's like bullet points, that I did, and I narrated those myself, and then we injected them into the audiobook version.
Nice, nice, nice. So yeah, definitely go pick that up. Sounds like some good information being shared in those. And I guess maybe kind of a last question. I know coming up on an hour and a half, and I don't you're running a business, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. And but I guess from a business coaching standpoint, can you maybe talk a little bit about, I guess, that, and maybe I'm not sure if you kind of want to share maybe one of your most I guess proudest moments of kind of coaching someone through their business and kind of to success, if you will. But what do most people, I know you have the book Sales Won't Save Your Business, but what are some of the things that you have come to find out in your kind of decades of experience and when trying to start a business, grow a business, run a business, that a lot of times are left out, especially when as you see when you come coach people.
um, things don't happen overnight. I think you have to remember that you're just one person. And I think it's important that you look at everything as like, okay, if I wasn't here, how would this get done, right? And what, because I always focus on three key areas, right? The team, the offer, and the process, the top, I call it. And so it's like, how do you go about putting that right team together, right? Well,
Mm.
part of that is building the processes out, so documenting what you do so that you can enable other people to do it. And it's really hard to let go of
Yeah.
that power, right? But you got to have the power to let power go. You have to have the power to say, I know that they're not going to do it 100% the way I wanted, but if I can get it to like even just 60 or 70%, and then
Yeah.
I can coach them and it takes me less time, and that less time might only be 15, 20 minutes less time.
Right.
But that's today, right? You got to train, just like we're training all these AIs. You got to train the person to how you want things, and how it's going to be accomplished.
Gotcha.
So and that's something that's like you constantly have to go back through that cycle, right? Of look at the processes I'm currently putting myself through that for the business, and then go and say, okay, well, what can I piece out, and then what can I send, and then literally piece out of eventually, but what can I send that off to somebody, whether it's in your organization or as a contractor outside of your organization. um so a lot of times, a lot of businesses that I've worked with are the older business owners,
Yep.
and part of the problem is they want to believe that their business is worth more than it actually is. And it's not because they haven't done the sales, but the
Right.
problem is because they're the key person. If they don't show up, the whole thing falls apart, right? So like, and we've run into that when even when we were being bought, from part of truck parts was being bought, is if you're not setting up those processes for other people to take the reins of, like, it all falls apart under you, right? You're the linchpin. So you have to give that power up to other people if you ever want it to be worth more, because you won't be there.
Yep.
Yes, you might be on as a consultant. I can tell you, even from a company that bought us, a multi-billion-dollar company that bought us, after about 2 months, they did not wanna hear from my dad at all. Even though they paid him for a year, they did not wanna hear from him about 6 to 8 weeks into the process. Truth be told, they probably would have been fine even before that. Um, but with that said, like, we had a lot of people around us to make it work, and we were integrating into a big fish, right? We were in
Yep.
a big ecosystem. So not every business is going to be sellable to as many people if you don't have those processes in place for somebody else to step
Mm,
in and,
I like
like,
it.
okay, I can, I'm going to become the linchpin person,
Yep.
but I'm not everything, right? Like, I can do that, and while managing my other businesses that made me enough money to help buy your business, which may or may not even be in an industry that I'm currently in,
Yep.
right? So your pool of people that can buy it becomes much bigger when you can set those processes up so that you're not everything doesn't come down to you all of the time with every problem.
Yep.
And it's hard. Like, I've done it with my dad. I've done it with other business owners. I've done it where you were asking, like, one of the proudest moments on the consulting side. Working with somebody who it's like it's them and it's their wife and then it's everybody else. And I'm like, well, you really got to get somebody else in there to work with you. Like, well, we tried twice and we had bad experiences. So, like, we're just going to keep grinding ourselves into the ground until, this no longer exists or whatever. And I'm like, well, okay, that's not somebody else. Like, we need to find another person. You got to hit the reset button and be more determined to find that other person than you are to just enable yourself to continue to grind yourself into dust.
Right.
um and eventually they found that person, and once they did that, it opened up the opportunity for the next person to come on that they were able to hire
Mm.
to take some of the other load off. And next thing you know, they were able to grow. They went from, I want to say it was like 60 employees outside of the two of them, to like over 100 now, just a few years later.
Mm.
Because they were in the travel industry, the
Okay.
travel agency industry. So they all these other agents, but they had to, like, put checks and balances in and do things that they didn't necessarily have the time for, but they were doing it. And like I said, they were grinding themselves into the ground in the process. So once they got, it's usually about the people, right? I always say, like, businesses are robots. They want to run 24/7.
Yep.
They're shiny. They just go 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 go, but they have soft gooey insides called
Mm.
humans. And humans have, like, outside problems. They have, like, mental challenges. They have physical challenges. They have health challenges. All these things, family challenges. It's not even just about that. Sometimes it's outside of family, right? Like
Right.
significant other challenges. So you have all these like challenges that are conflicting on the inside of this thing that's just like, I want to run, I want to run, I want to go 24/7. Like we can't run like that, right? We're not robots. We do have to sleep. We do have to maintain relationships. We do have to maintain like thing like ourselves, right? Working out or doing things that make us, turn our brain off so we can rest in different ways. Um and a lot of times it's those internal conflicts that's the bigger problem. I mean, I would say, as a kid, as a 7-year-old kid, I wanted to be a child psychologist. um and that was because I was going through dealing with my family's divorce, and I wanted to help other kids going through divorce like
Mm.
I was. Now, I didn't want to go to school for like a decade after already going to school, as I found out later on in life. But I've gotten to help so many people and amplify that through businesses, right?
Right.
And that's part of the whole being super thing, right? It's not about me being super Joe or awesome or whatever. It's about enabling other people to be the best version of themselves around you. And it's not always easy. I promise you, it's not easy for me all the time. And it's something I got to check myself quite often, that like, am I doing enough to not just for myself but for the people around me? And
No.
that's what I want. That's the whole what the super community is, about, is bringing those people together that want for more for the people around them than just themselves.
Gotcha. And that's I think that's great advice there. And then I guess maybe kind of the last thing, I kind of checking out some of your videos and your more your popular videos and some things that you said. I kind of wanted to get your maybe reasoning behind it. One of the things was uh stay profitable, which I do agree with. You say grow I think low and slow, but staying profitable. Can you maybe say a few words about the key of not burying yourself in debt too early to try to maybe scale too quickly and just kind of make sure you're staying profitable throughout that process?
It it's like going and buying a lottery ticket that is going to be a winner, but you don't know which one it is. Like you had, like I got 150, 250,000 numbers, or like I was talking earlier about the AI, like, oh, we'll just
Yep.
create all the patents,
Um,
create patents for anything and everything, and then we'll just sue everybody into oblivion. Um, you just don't know, what's gonna be that thing. And I always, one of the things I do talk about on the show, I say it quite often, is like, especially when the product or the service isn't IP, right? It's not patentable. It's not something that's like really protectable. Like, oh, I have the best quesadilla ever. Like, you never had a quesadilla like my quesadilla. Okay, cool. You rush in to get this investor, right? Because you think that having this debt, this obligation on top of you is going to help you. When really it very much can go the opposite way. It's like pushing the boulder up and then all of a sudden realizing that, like, oh, I'm out of energy halfway up and now the boulder's rolling back on me. um you got to be careful of that, right? That you're not taking on too much debt that you couldn't pay back,
mm,
right? That So that's why I was like, okay, you take this $100,000 for 10% of your quesadilla business. Okay, awesome. Maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't work out. But at the end of the day, you can go get another brand, build another quesadilla fun logo or whatever, and go make quesadillas somewhere else and in another location, right? This isn't I invented the pump for
yep,
this, and like I need to patent this part, right?
yep,
This is what I had the patent for. And it's gonna be crazy 'cause it's gonna be on everything. Everything's gonna have a pump. um if it's something that's not protectable, just you got to be very careful of what is of not getting too deep into it. And again, if 100,000, like, you could pay $100,000 back.
right,
It's not a million, it's not 10 million or 20 million or something like that. Like, you could, yeah, it would be slow, but you could, like, get a second job and like start paying back money and stuff like that. Like, it's not something you could never unbury yourself from, right? In the amount of time that you probably have. So
Gotcha.
is, but again, you take that weight on that debt, it isn't always the best way. I mean, the sharks say it not that often, but often enough that, like, having an investor isn't necessarily the best path for you.
Right.
Having something that's growing, that's slow growth, but it's growing, and it's compounding on itself, especially if it's like something that like a disposable, right? Or something that a consumable, right? It's like, okay, as we grow, it's like people are going to start, buy more and more and more and more of it. um it's not like a one and done, like, oh, I
Right.
bought this infinity cube thing, right? Like, I'm not buying another one of these. Maybe for my other desk at home, I probably should, honestly, because I love playing that. This thing saves my life. But it's like, how many of those am I going to buy in my lifetime,
Right.
right? So it's like, you have to look at it from that. It's like, okay, well, if I was making soap, cool. Like, you buy one bar, then you buy another bar, and you buy
Yep.
another bar, and that's a customer, right? And then it's
Yep.
like we get two customers now. They're buying a bar each, every 2 weeks or whatever, and then you just start stacking customers, and yeah, you're gonna have some attrition and all, where people drop off, but for the most part, like, you have this opportunity to keep stacking. And if you have that, I mean, then I'd say, yeah, it's possible for you to, or it may be a better outlook for you to take on that money, take on that debt, kind of like in the scrub daddy sense, right? Like, it's a consumable, so you're buying, and once you get locked into wanting that scrub daddy and using it, like, you're going to keep going
Buying
back
it.
to that well,
Yep.
right, as a customer. But if it's something that, like, hey, you take that deal, and if it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, like, I can still go make panini somewhere else, right? I can start another panini truck.
Yep.
Yeah, it's going to cost money. It's going to take time to get that money back, but we're talking about paninis here, not
Right.
like not the pump. Is this a patent thing? This has to be a patent thing, right?
Yeah, and it probably has expired since then, or
Probably.
but you, man, you see some crazy things where people are, they come up with some, some new ways of doing it, which they like to try to look to get a patent on it as well. Which I guess that's another story on whether or not. Again, I always say I can get a patent on almost anything. Now, how valuable it is a different story. Based on just kind of what's out there and maybe what the market is and timing and all that stuff. But no, yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely agree
Is
with.
it worth defending, right? Like, and
Yeah.
that's the thing. It's like, yeah, it might be a better mousetrap, but if that better mousetrap costs 3 times as much money, yeah, there's gonna be somebody that's down for it, but that doesn't necessarily, like we were talking about the laundry basket, right? Like, yeah, they're gonna be able to sell some. I don't know if they're gonna. I don't know.
But and that's the thing though, it's almost sometimes you just don't know. So for example, Nancy Tedeschi, which I interviewed early on, she had this snappy screw. She got a patent on it. It's essentially for your eyeglasses, the frame part, and then you have the part that go around your ears. Uh Sometimes that get kind of broken off from the frame part, and you have to put the screw back, you have to put a new screw in there to kind of reattach it. And she was selling these things like crazy, to the point where the largest lens distributor in the world had initially did an exclusive distribution agreement, and then an exclusive license agreement to license this thing out from her for the rest of the term of the patent. And yeah, she's selling this stuff. She manufacturing it in China. They're trying to knock it off. That's another thing, another way where is actually a pretty good invention where people are trying to knock it off. So she actually defended it successfully, not only in the U.S. but also in China, and
Wow.
I mean, she's making millions of dollars a year off this thing, but and then she gets a quarterly royalty. But again, it sounds like you never know, because it's on the face of it. You're like, man, oh, it's a screw. Okay, it's cool. Yeah, it sells for less than $1. And what's so important about this? But next thing you know, she's making millions of dollars of this thing. And that's the thing where it's like you never know what's going to just really take off, and maybe what's not going to take off. So yeah, I'm not sure.
I mean, it's hard to know, right? Like, it's also comes down to, like, the meetings that if you're going to license it, right? How good of a day is that person having? What's going on in that
Yeah.
person's life when you go to have that meeting? Are they going to be able to see the vision for why it's important to make that step and say, yeah, this is worth we're going to be paying you millions of dollars. And like for every one story like that, how many are they never even got the interview, they never even got to the table, right? They
But
never even got to have that conversation.
and that's the thing these days with like Amazon and platforms like that. And this is the big thing is you can manufacture this thing and sell it on Amazon. So not only are you manufacturing it yourself, or whether you're getting it done in China or the US, but you don't have to worry about having to try to get into a big box retailer. You can sell this thing on Amazon. Like I said, with the guy who sold his water slides on Amazon. And I'm not saying that you need to make millions of dollars a year, but if you're making $500,000, heck, if you're making 300 grand a year selling this thing, you can do this for the next 20 years.
Well,
So,
so the problem with Amazon though is you got the Amazon fees, right? That's the problem, and you don't own the customer base.
but this is the good thing about Amazon. You can, as you said, you have to defend it, and that can cost money. But then Amazon has a platform, and I've dealt with it, and it's a very good platform where if somebody's trying to copy your product and sell it on Amazon, you can show your patent and do a few other things, and they get it taken down immediately. So now you're not
Yeah, I've
spending
heard that.
the hundreds of thousands of dollars or the millions of dollars having to defend us in court. If it's on Amazon, you got a copycat. Amazon makes it extremely easy to get that copycat taken down. Now you may have to do this every so often, but it's and that means something is working. That means you're making a lot of money. You're selling these things like hotcakes. If you have people are trying to copycat it left and right, and I think that's a great alternative from having to go to court where you're going to spend way more money to try to take down a copycat. So
It
I guess that's the
does
benefit with Amazon
give a
and some of
lot of
these. Go ahead.
power though. That is a lot of power to Amazon. I mean, so I mean that's great when it works out the way you want or expect it to, but if it
Yep.
does when it doesn't. So I have friends that have had both experiences, great experiences where they
Yeah.
just, submit the thing and they're constantly just knocking down those copycats, though it's gotten a lot harder too with all this AI stuff where they're just submitting so many products like with with variations and different, versions of the name.
Right.
It is definitely a problem on Amazon's front to have to deal with, but like I said, it's great when it works the way it's supposed, it should, but it's just a lot of power to Amazon, which, hey, I mean, I'm guilty too. I buy on Amazon too, so like,
Oh yeah, for sure. And hopefully
like
it gets to the point where like you got the joepardo.com. So now hopefully you get a chance to kind of funnel those, create a website or whatever the case may be on your own and kind of funnel those. Because I mean you do have these emails and this, a lot of customers where you can kind of funnel them to your own website. And as you maybe kind of do additional products, now they're not necessarily going through Amazon and you're giving Amazon a portion of that money, but you can kind of funnel them through your website and whatnot. Similar to with YouTube, where it's like, okay, you have the YouTube show and things like that, but YouTube has a lot of power in terms of what you can and can't talk about, and obviously you're giving them the money,
oh
so
yeah.
it's a give and take to I guess everything. But I guess maybe go ahead.
Well, that's why you should have your own podcast and your own RSS feed where you control the feed.
Yeah,
So it's not, yeah, like YouTube could turn me off tomorrow, but please don't. But I still have the podcast, right? I still have my email list. I still own
yeah.
the list of people that are connected to my show and to me. So I think that we cannot forget that as these companies get, I mean, even YouTube with like, oh, now we have podcasts and we offer up RSS feeds. And it's like, yeah, but you already have enough power as it is. And I love YouTube. YouTube's opened up right on my screen on the left here, right? Like it's not going away for me anytime soon, but I I can't help but think, just like the Amazon thing, it's like the benefits. So at some point the juice might not be worth the squeeze.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, yeah, you definitely have to make that I guess assessment with whatever you're doing and see whether or not, like you said, it's worth that squeeze at that point. I guess maybe the last thing, just trying to get you out on. I know at the end of your videos, you typically say, "Hey, you go look at their website or whatever the case may be," and you say, "Well, I mean, I like faces on a website." Uh,
Yes.
what,
No, ding the bell for that.
what's the reasoning behind that? Can you maybe kind of share with the audience the importance of faces on the website?
Yeah, so faces, hands, dogs, if it's a dog product, like people connect with faces, right? They self-identify, they see themselves in that moment. So that's why it's so important. Like I get so disappointed like when I see sites that there's like we have this invention, we have this thing, and it's like it's just the thing, right? And maybe it's being used to some degree, but like I want to see people. I want to see the experiences, what's the experiential value of what I'm going to get out of this, the reaction that I'm going to get from it. And that helps me connect with people or connect with a product, connect with a business, is seeing faces. So that's why I think faces are so important. Seeing person wear the thing, use the thing. To some degree, it's like, yeah, you got to have may just be the thing with hands, but at least it's thing with hands instead of just
Yeah.
thing on the thing.
Right.
So that's I think it's important. I think that it also gives almost like a sense of validation that like somebody else has touched the thing, right?
Mhm.
Like somebody else has played with the thing or watched like they've been around it. So I think that's really important from my perspective. When you come to a site and you see like a lack of faces, it's, to me, it's very noticeable. With that said, like I know like our Pardo truckparts.com, where we sell truck parts, has no faces. It's all parts all the time. But we do have pictures of the warehouse with the shelves with the stuff. So if you go to pardos.net, we have a video that has people in it, shows the shop and what we do and things like that. Oh, I haven't gotten quite there. I need to do a video. We have like a whole marketing thing I'm putting together on the parts side. But yeah, it's I think it's really important to see it in motion. See it where it's not fake.
Right.
And I know it's hard to tell now with AI, is ridiculous. But I think that that's ultimately what's going to win out with people is just seeing. I mean, you see it in the ads, right? Like, oh, here's an Apple commercial, and it's like has nothing to do with the iPhone till like the
Yeah.
last second of it, like literal, maybe second and a half.
No, and
That's Go ahead.
I know I was gonna say, yeah, that seems like to be the new thing where they kinda say the thing that's gonna get at the eyeballs, but the video is probably not really about that said thing, if that makes sense.
I know I've guessed wrong on I mean, I don't watch a whole lot of TV, but I watch football and sports, and I know I've guessed wrong when it comes to like, is this commercial about this car, or oh no, it's about something totally different.
Right. I guess that keeps you on your toes. I guess just a what else would you, as we kinda close out the last, what else would you want the audience to know, just for really up and coming entrepreneurs, business folks who are trying to start a business or kind of get their business off the ground? What, just kind of one last thing that you kind of want them to know or keep in mind as they're kind of going through the process and the journey?
Yeah, every just again, one step at a time, right? Everything doesn't happen overnight. Don't get that. I think this is a trademark term or whatever, comparanoia, where you're looking at other people. Or if you're watching Shark Tank, you're like, well, why am I not on Shark Tank, or why am I not getting this opportunity? Why am I not one of so and so's favorite things? Don't worry about that stuff. Focus in on the audience that you're going to sell to, right? Those are the most important people in your world, right? What are they doing? What are they buying? What do they get up for, right? And that's what I have the avatar builder. If you go to joepardo.com/avatar, it's 64 questions to go through and build. You're literally building a person, right?
Mhm.
And in that guide, you go through and like, it's like, are they a truck person, a car person? If they're a truck person, like what truck are they? Are they a Ford? Are they a GM, a Chevy, whatever? And then like goes deep into that. Why are they that? Right. And then once you start painting that picture of that person, now you can be like, cool. So they're a Ford F-150 person, right? Okay. Why? So you go and you start looking at the commercials for the Ford F-150s and start looking at the marketing that they're doing that's reaching that audience that you're trying to reach. So you can,
Gotcha.
yeah, obviously you might not be selling a truck, but you're going to pull things from that and marry it with how am I going to reach that person? So many times though, when you do that guide, and I have gone through it with so many people, you end up being like, what's the significant other? Because that's who I actually need to be reaching. So it's like, okay, so you built the guy, now we're gonna build the significant other. And what are they watching? What are they, what are they tuning in for? What are they queuing in on? In fact, the person I was talking about earlier that utilized iCast, the reason he came in was because he was like, oh, I saw this Facebook ad for a mechanic's job, right? And it made me stop and go look at their Indeed ad. I said, well, okay, cool. So he sent me the Indeed ad, right? What the classified is. I said, but what's the Facebook ad that got you to stop? That's what I want to know, right? That's what I want to see. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is great. Like, I can, I'll look through this and maybe pull a few pointers out. It's always be willing to learn, right? And that's another key thing, right? It's always be willing to learn. So while I am teaching on my YouTube channel, I'm always learning because I'm not in all those industries. I've
Right.
never been in a lot of those industries. But
Yeah.
it's funny to me that a lot of those people that are in other industries, they come to me, when they come to be interviewed on my show, and they're like, "How did you know so much about my industry, more than the sharks did, or more, than the hour that I was in that tank, and
Yeah.
you only saw 8 minutes of it?" How did you know? I said, well, it's just experience. I watch a lot of documentaries. I take in a lot of information. I watch things as educational, even when it's entertaining. I'm
Yeah.
always looking at the why. Why is it like this? How is it like that? How can I make something that I can adapt to what I do, or bring something new to the audience, that isn't necessarily experiencing that stuff. So, but yeah, that ad, right? You go back to that ad, and I'm like, he's like, I didn't screenshot the ad. I didn't think that was. He didn't think that was the important part. I was like, no, that's the important part. The classified, like I can go read classifieds all day, but I want to know what stopped your scroll.
Right.
What stopped you in your tracks to say, I want to click on this and just take a look, see what they're doing.
No,
So
that's yeah.
always be looking and learning, and like I said, I'm always learning. That's just how I try to approach things. Yeah, I don't read books. I want to read every single word in the book, so I make sure that I know what I'm reading, but it takes so much time that I just don't have the time to dedicate to
Right.
that's why I watch documentaries or YouTube at 2x speed,
Yeah.
and just try to constantly digest as much as, and I'll slow it down. I'm not always running at 2x, but I try to speed through as much as possible and slow down to the parts I actually want, which is probably how people read books so fast. But I don't know. I feel like I need to be a completionist as well. So
No,
there's that.
no, for sure. And I think that's a good way to close out. Keep learning and always growing. I definitely appreciate you, Joe, for coming on and sharing kind of your story with us. I think, like I said, definitely an interesting story, and I think the audience will find that the same that hey. And go to the website, buy the books, Super Tank, pitch the Super Tank to the Super Tank if you have a good idea. And hey, until next time, audience, take care.